in some ways it felt like there was this Great Depression out there, this social Great Depression. But the big contrast was that this wasn't like the 1930s when output was declining. This is the time when American economic output is soaring, when the market is doing fantastically well, corporate profits are doing brilliantly. And yet there is a demographic that is absolutely going through a depression, enough of a depression that mortality for the whole country has fallen. And so in trying to understand how that has been tolerated, I think partly it's that in places like New York, one doesn't really feel it. In the first-class cabin, to some degree, one's not really aware, except intellectually, of what's going on below decks. But if you pursue that metaphor, it really does feel that there is a hole in the shell below decks, and that's not good for anybody on the boat when that happens. And this is already, I think, affecting the U.S. as a whole, partly through the medium of politics. One reason why President Trump is President Trump is the distress in these communities. And look, the reasons people voted for him are complicated, but one factor in his election, I think, was this desperation in a lot of the country. And one of the factors that correlated to a higher vote for Trump than Romney had received 4 years before was greater deaths of despair in that county. In other words, deaths from drugs, alcohol, and suicide. Now, what went wrong? So Yamhill is essentially lily white. And in the 1990s, there were a lot of invidious and quite hostile comments made about the suffering in African-American communities at that time in Yamhill, and I think in a lot of white communities around the country. And the narrative was that this is too bad, but this is about what was called black culture. And this was about bad decisions and deadbeat dads and people making bad choices and using drugs and family breakdown, et cetera, et cetera. And meanwhile, there was a great Harvard sociologist, William Julius Wilson, who argued, no, it's about jobs. And Professor Wilson was exactly right, because when jobs left white places like Yamhill, and when they left Maine and Appalachia, the same patterns unfolded. And there is, in some ways, a remarkable parallel with a delay between the suffering in places like Baltimore earlier and what happened in communities like Yamhill.